Well, in the complex and long-standing saga of the Israel-Palestine conflict, an expert emerges as a guiding force, shedding light on the intricacies that define this historical and deeply rooted struggle. As we navigate the nuanced narratives and divergent perspectives, our focus turns to an individual well-versed in the geopolitical landscape and the social historical intricacies of the region. Well, joining us today via Zoom, we have Dr. Anas Iktait, a lecturer of the political economy of the Middle East at Australia National University. Hello, Professor Anas. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Good morning, Professor. Thank you for joining us. So, Professor, before we dive into the topic, because we got a lot of grounds to cover in this conversation, but surely you have your contacts and network from all around the world, and you probably could update us about what's been happening per of today in the conflict area, Professor.
What you describe as the conflict area, obviously, I'm assuming is the Gaza Strip. And what we have in the Gaza Strip at the moment is a total humanitarian crisis. Since the 7th of October, we have seen at least 15,000 Palestinians killed, about one-third of them Palestinian children. We have also seen the complete destruction of the Palestinian public and civilian infrastructure in the Gaza Strip. A military invasion into the Gaza Strip that has resulted also in the displacement in about 70% of the Gaza Strip's population from the northern parts of the Gaza Strip to the southern parts of the Gaza Strip. And then now there is a serious threat for the displacement of these Palestinians even further south, which means into Egypt, which the Egyptian government as well as the Jordanian government have expressed very clearly would be a red line that Israel should not cross. Now, on the Israeli side, on October the 7th, we have also seen about 1,200 Israelis killed in the attack that started or instigated this current round of conflict between Palestinian armed groups in Gaza and the Israeli military. But all in all, what we are seeing is a continuation of the results of Israel's occupation of Palestinian land, as well as Israel's colonial project that didn't start on the 7th of October, but has been around since 1948.
And seeing the conflict that has been, as you said, going on since 1948, Professor, what are some of the factors that you think are contributing, especially to this long-standing conflict that has unfortunately lasted for many, many years? And it has never been in the case in other conflicts or wars in other countries in which the occupation has lasted for this long. What do you think are some of the aspects that has also contributed to that fact?
The tragedy of the ongoing suffering of the Palestinians in particular is how well documented it has been even before the creation of the State of Israel in 1948. What we have currently in Palestine and Israel is a belligerent military occupation, as well as a settler colonial project that has been contravening international law, including United Nations Security Council resolutions, as well as United Nations General Assembly resolutions. So the tragedy here is the fact that it is a well-documented conflict. It's a conflict that has seen the involvement of a large number of international actors. And it's a conflict that does have the blueprints for a solution. The problem with finding the solution or achieving the solution is the adherence to international law and the adherence to existing United Nations resolutions and the implementation of international law throughout Palestine and Israel. And this, in my opinion, is the largest strategy. And yes, the Palestinians have been living under one of the longest continuous occupations in living memory. And the Palestinians are some of the only people in the world today who are still prevented from self-determination and from living in freedom. But this is happening at the same time as when we have extensive resolutions and blueprints for a solution for a peaceful settlement that would result in a peaceful outcome for this ongoing issue.
So, Professor, the reaction of the international community, other countries, is definitely also a major contributing factor in what's happening at the moment. Could you tell us the latest update of what's been going on geopolitically from the Arab nations and also the big countries that involves, say, United States?
The United States has been very supportive of Israel. And has even extended its support to tangible outcomes, meaning that the United States has been supporting the military action of Israel in the Gaza Strip in particular. Now, neighboring states in the region have been very clear. Jordan, as well as Egypt in particular, have issued statements calling for the prevention of Palestinians to be displaced or ethnically cleansed from the Gaza Strip into Egyptian lands. The Arab League, as well as most of the Muslim majority states, met last week in Riyadh, where they issued and agreed, which is an achievement by itself for nearly 1/3 of the world's countries to agree and have a single press release from that meeting. And that meeting agreed on supporting Egypt in its position in opening the crossing between Egypt and the Gaza Strip, and for delivering humanitarian access into the Gaza Strip. These countries also agreed on calling for an immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, and for ending the Israeli occupation of Palestinian land based on United Nations Security Council Resolution 242. More geopolitically also, we see that Turkey has had an interesting position. The Turkish president has been very elaborative and clear about Turkey's position and disagreement with Israel about its actions in the Gaza Strip. We have also seen wider reaction across the region with many militant groups from Hezbollah to militant groups in Iraq, also the Houthi Yemeni government in Yemen, participating directly or indirectly in this war by rhetoric or by actions as well. So it's a very tense geopolitical situation across the Middle East today for Israel, for the Palestinians, and for the vast majority of the surrounding states.
And knowing these tense situation, we got updates that there was a truce, a 4-day truce that has been a ceasefire agreed that's mediated by Qatar. Just wondering, Professor, what do you think, first of all, of this deal? Or we really don't know how long it will last, if it will continue, about the sustainability after the 4 days. But first, what do you think about this deal? And then what do you think the role Qatar has, especially in possibly further mediating this even more and hopefully reaching to a permanent ceasefire between Israel and Palestine?
Well, Qatar has come out or has shaped itself in recent years as a very influential mediator, not only with regards to the Palestinians, but also at the international stage. So it's definitely a diplomatic win for Qatar. It's also a diplomatic win for the two other states that were extensively involved in these negotiations or in mediating this agreement, primarily Egypt and the United States. All three states have worked on securing this agreement and have negotiated extensively with both Hamas and Israel to reach this if ceasefire, if you want to call it. I think a more accurate way of describing it is a so-called humanitarian pause, and which indicates that it's a pause in hostilities, particularly from the Israeli side at the moment inside of Gaza, which also imply that at the end of this 4-day period, the Israeli military will resume its action in the Gaza Strip. Now, what we know is that during the next 4 days, starting from 10 a.m. local time on Thursday, in local time in Jerusalem, 50 Israeli captives from the Gaza Strip will be released gradually on a daily basis over 4 days. And then at least 150 Palestinian children and women that are held in Israeli prisons will also be released. Also, we know that a number of humanitarian trucks or trucks carrying humanitarian aid and some fuel will also be allowed to enter into Gaza from Egypt. At the same time, we know that Israeli military will cease its operations, particularly in the northern parts of Gaza, and will cease its aerial operation for most of the time in the southern parts and for a few hours on a daily basis in the northern part. So these are the terms of the humanitarian pause, if you will. Only time will tell if it will be extended. The way that the pause has been structured has been to ensure the gradual implementation on a daily basis. So the next 24 hours will be very critical, because if the gradual implementation for the first day is not met, or any of the terms are broken, then the remainder of the deal will also be broken, and we will certainly go back to direct confrontation before the end of the 4-day period.
Professor Anas, if you could elaborate probably about the domestic political constellation in both Palestine and Israel, and how the dynamic of this domestic political constellation affects the decision making in this day and time.
I will start with the Israeli side. It is common knowledge right now in Israeli press and through Israeli academic circles and media that the political career of Benjamin Netanyahu is over. As soon as the war in Gaza is over, most likely Benjamin Netanyahu will be out of office for good. And this is significant because Benjamin Netanyahu has been the longest serving Israeli prime minister in the history of the state. What we also know is that Benjamin Netanyahu has formed the most right-wing extreme government in Israel's history. It includes ministers that are very adamant and very clear about and very vocal about their opposition to the establishment of a Palestinian state and to the withdrawal of Palestinian lands occupied in 1967. So the political scene in Israel is in a state of war and is quite fragmented. And we will most likely the end of Netanyahu's tenure is going to result in a lot of fragmentation and a lot of tension in Israeli society. And Israel will most certainly go into early elections when this war is over. On the Palestinian side, the situation is not much better. The Palestinian political scene is fragmented between the Fatah-led Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and the Hamas-led government in the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian Liberation Organization, as an umbrella organization representing the Palestinian people, is no longer effective, has been completely consumed by the Palestinian Authority and the current Palestinian president, Mahmoud Abbas. And we do not really see a unified position from the Palestinian Authority as well as Hamas on the situation in the Gaza Strip. So it's also a very pessimistic and dark outlook for the Palestinians politically going forward. It is a good time for the Palestinians, obviously, to reconsider their options and to unify politically in face of what's happening in the Gaza Strip, but it doesn't seem at the moment that this is happening.
And so we do see a complex dynamics between those world leaders as well. And Professor Anas, now we've gone through more of the detailed account of the situation. For the viewers watching who do not have a background information of the conflict in Gaza between Israel and Palestine, can you please give us a description of, first of all, of the history of this conflict, how it happened, why it happened, and give the viewers as well as a brief, detailed account of the issue?
Yes, the situation in Palestine is nearly 100 years old. Actually, it is 100 years old. Started with the British Mandate of Palestine at the beginning of the 20th century. Then it escalated into European migration into Palestine, settling Palestinian lands, and the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine, of Israel, basically in 1948. During this period, between 1947 and 1949, to be more precise, at least 700,000 Palestinians were displaced from their homes, mostly ethnically cleansed. And a large number of these people were actually ethnically cleansed to the modern-day Gaza Strip. This is why the population of the Gaza Strip today, 70% of it, are registered refugees with the United Nations. The remainder of the Palestinian refugees were relocated to the West Bank, to Syria, to Lebanon, to Jordan, and elsewhere around the world. Since 1967, Israel occupied the remaining Palestinian lands from the British Mandate of Palestine, and these include East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip. Palestinians living in these lands have been living under direct military occupation since 1967. And this military occupation controls every facet of their life, including what the limited Palestinian government that operates primarily in the West Bank since 1994 does. So the Palestinian Authority does not necessarily represent a state on land per se. It represents fragmented governance units that are completely controlled by the Israeli and surrounded by the Israeli military. So this is to say that the Palestinians have been living under military occupation since 1967, and they have been the victims of a settler colonial project that really is about 100 years old. Now, the best that can be achieved at the moment out of this conflict is to raise awareness about the situation in Palestine, and for eventually the implementation of international law, whereby the Palestinians have the right for self-determination and to have access to equal rights and access to a national state of their own as well.
So, Professor, we talk about the history, about what was happening, and also how back then it's a different geopolitical time compared to what we have now on this era of multipolar geopolitical stability in the world. So, what are the possible scenarios that will happen in the near future about the situation from your point of view, Professor?
This is a very difficult question to answer. However, there are three factors that can impact the outcome of this war, how this war ends, and also the outcome afterwards. And these factors are the position of the United States. It looks like the United States is extremely supportive of the Israeli position, but it looks like its patience may be running out, particularly when we consider the very high toll of civilian casualties resulting from Israeli bombardment, with at least 1/3 of all killed being Palestinian children. So this is the first factor. The second factor is the position of the Arab states, and particularly states that are surrounding Palestine and Israel, Jordan and Egypt. They have been quite forceful in their position in recent years, or at least in the past month or so. But the development of and the evolution of their position, including the increasing pressure from the Arab street, is also going to have very important ramifications, both for the Palestinians and Israelis. Finally, I believe that the international pressure in the form of civil society movements, the United Nations and other international organizations, as well as media representation of the ongoing occupation in Palestine, is going to be a very important factor that will determine the long-term outcomes of this conflict in Gaza, and also of what will happen afterwards. So these three factors, the United States, Arab states' position, as well as international organizations, media, and civil society position, is going to be very influential going forward, and will determine whether the Palestinians will continue to live under the conditions that existed before the 7th of October, or there will be a fundamental change in these conditions going forward.
And Professor, how long do you think that would be achievable, or before that? First, do you think it is even possible for those three factors to work in harmony, for them to gain the freedom that is theirs to begin with? And second of all, like, how long do you think it would take for them to achieve that as well?
Again, very difficult for me to answer that. However, what I can say is that we have seen, obviously not an identical situation, but we have seen many situations of national liberation movements, people living under occupation or under apartheid, such as the situation in South Africa. and occupations and colonization, such as the situation in Algeria. And then we have situations whereby these systems were dismantled or they changed, and the people that were under occupation or under apartheid systems gained their freedom and their right for self-determination. So whether this will take a very long time or it will be sooner than the current geopolitical landscape suggests, that's something that only time will tell us. But the conditions are there, and changes are happening around the world, obviously at the political level and also at the civil society level, and only time will tell how things will work out in the future.
Okay, Professor, could you please stay with us? We'll be moving on to our next report, and then we'll talk to you in a second. So Indonesia's first batch aid has reached Palestinians, and second batch was sent by government on November 20th. And meanwhile, 2,600 people are still staying in the Indonesian hospital. Let's take a look.
Head of Crisis Center at Health Ministry Sumarijaya said in Tangerang the medical equipment to Palestine consisted of emergency kit for minor surgery needs and a supplement food for pregnant women and children under 5 years old. The medicines and medical equipment sent to Palestine consisted of, among others, hospital sundries, injection needles, suture needles, wound dressing, antibiotics, and so on. He explains that the Indonesian government will send another batch of humanitarian aid if they receive support from the people. Health Ministry also deployed a medical service team to help Palestine people, he concludes. Secretary of Directorate General of Funding and Risk Management at Finance Ministry Ubaidi Soke Hamidi said in Tangerang that the aid dispatch on Wednesday early dawn was part of the Indonesian government's humanitarian aid deployment. Ubaidi said that the government allocated a total of 31.9 billion rupiah, equivalent to $2 million for this second batch aid through Indonesian Agency for International Development or Indonesian Aid. The aid deployed to Palestine were the basic medical necessities for Gaza residents, such as medicine and hospital sundries. Ashraf Al-Qudra, a spokesperson for Palestinian Ministry of Health based in Gaza, said in a statement on Tuesday that at least 400 injured people, along with their families, are still in Indonesian hospital in Gaza, in addition to 200 medical personnel and around 2,000 refugees. Al-Qudra also said that there are 259 injured individuals, a number of civilians and medical personnel still inside the Al-Shifa hospital. He said that there is no definite date for their evacuation from Al-Shifa hospital, which is under full control of Israel.
Absolutely atrocious what's happening, and also what's happening in Indonesian hospital in Gaza, where as the latest update, we have so many people having difficulties over there and a lot of casualties. So Professor, what have you heard about what happened in the Indonesian hospital, and what do you think about the situation?
The Indonesian hospital is located in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. It is located in Gaza City, to be more precise, and in the northern eastern parts of Gaza City. These parts have been subject to intensive Israeli bombardments since the first day of this war. And now it appears as if Israeli tanks have also reached the vicinity and surrounded the Indonesian hospital. So the Indonesian hospital has been extremely important in providing medical attention as supplies and care to many Palestinians who were injured during this war, and also has been quite critical in providing shelter to a large number of people that had their houses either completely destroyed or they were forced to leave their houses because of Israeli shelling and bombardment. Now we are learning that also the Indonesian hospital is being targeted, and its staff as well as patients are being ordered to evacuate and to head south. Obviously, this is extremely difficult, given the current situation. The vast majority of roads in Gaza are partially or completely destroyed by bombardment. There is virtually no fuel in the northern parts of Gaza, in Gaza City, and a large number of patients will face a very difficult choice of remaining behind and not being able, obviously, to walk to the southern parts of Gaza, because it's a several kilometer walk from the Indonesian hospital to the declared zones in South Gaza. So the situation is catastrophic, to say the least. And this is part and parcel of the wider healthcare system in the Gaza Strip that has completely collapsed. The vast majority of hospitals, particularly in the north, have completely come out of service in recent weeks. And the Indonesian hospital is a part and parcel of this wider system that has seen the entire healthcare system collapse in the Gaza Strip in its entirety.
And in dealing with these catastrophic situations, there has been aid that has been sent from several countries around the world, as well as Indonesia.
Yeah.
That has the first batch from Indonesia has reached Gaza. However, the
From
second
Rafah Crossing,
from Rafah Crossing,
yeah.
however, the second has not. So, Professor, do you happen to have any updates on the Rafah Crossing at this moment? We know that at a certain point it was closed for aid, and they allowed aid, but in very little amounts. What is the current and most latest updates on that?
I don't have very detailed information. However, what I know through reading United Nations reports from the ground is that the number of trucks that are being allowed into Gaza fluctuate on a daily basis. Yes, some aid has trickled into the Gaza Strip, but it's nowhere near what the Gaza Strip needs, given how disastrous the humanitarian situation has been, how catastrophic it's been. So what we know is that there is a small number of aid that has trickled in. Indonesian aid may have been part of this aid that has been trickling into the Gaza Strip. But we also know that there are convoys of thousands of trucks carrying humanitarian aid, fuel, food supplies, water, sanitation supplies, and so on that have been condensed on the Egyptian side, waiting for approval to cross into the Gaza Strip. And I won't be surprised if the current shipment of Indonesian aid is going to be part of these truck convoys that are waiting approval to enter the Gaza Strip. Now, the primary question is, will this aid be allowed to be delivered to the northern parts of Gaza, and particularly in Gaza City and the vicinity of the Indonesian hospital? This is the crucial question, which it seems that based on the announcement for the 4-day pause in hostilities that we saw recently, it seems that the Palestinians are saying that aid and fuel will be allowed into the northern parts of Gaza, but the Israelis are stressing that aid and fuel will not be allowed into the northern parts of Gaza. So this matter, only time will tell whether aid will make it to the northern parts or not. And it could be actually a very crucial point on the implementation of the hostility or cessation of hostilities for the next 4 days, and whether this is going to be successful or not.
Professor, thank you for sharing your expertise with us. But before we go, maybe you would like to give a statement or convey a message to the world. Go ahead, Professor.
Thank you. I think I've shared a lot of information, and thank you for having me on your channel, and I look forward to speaking with you again in the future.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor, for the time, and we'll see you in another moment. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Professor.
Yeah, so, you know, things are still developing, and we're hoping also that all the aid that's been sent to Palestine could reach them at the short amount of time that we have.
Yeah.
So let's take a break.
That's true, yes. Let's take a break. That's very insightful conversation from Dr. Anas Iktait from Australia National University. And we do hope, Willie, that there will be a more permanent deal soon, or ceasefire, especially in the area of Gaza and for the people. So don't go anywhere, for we'll be back after a short break only on Starting Point. Stay tuned.